Marco, sei live?
Okay. Welcome to this session on MySQL. I'm Marco Carlessi. I'm a pre-sales for MySQL inside the Oracle company. And I'm more than happy to be here with you. And in this session, we can have a presentation about what is the MySQL in terms of the MySQL itself. So we can start now with the presentation and let's go with the technical session. So in terms of the presentation, we are focusing on the MySQL database. That is a well-known database inside the databases ecosystems. As I told you, I'm working in the company that is called Oracle. Many of you probably are aware of what is Oracle. And I started a long time ago in a system integrator company working as a consultant. So I know the issues, the problems, the needs that customers and consultants and partners have. I worked as a trainer for virtualization, storage, and since 2013, I'm working in this role as a technical specialist. And in this role, I explain to customers and users what is MySQL, the benefits and the technical advantages in using it. So we are speaking in this presentation about MySQL and microservices. So the first topic of this agenda is why MySQL 8. Then we are in a good situation where we can speak about the new MySQL 8 that offer SQL and NoSQL interface. Then we can go through why MySQL is a good fit for microservices. In terms of Q&A, I reserve some time at the end of the presentation, so you can use the chat to write the questions, and in the end of the presentation, I answer to all your doubts. And I remember you that there is also the opportunity to connect one-to-one session in the next part of the presentation at the end of the presentation. So we can start with more information about MySQL, answering the question why a speech on MySQL. First, MySQL is the most popular open source database. This is not calculated by me or by my company, but you can connect to the DB engine website that calculates the overall ranking of the databases available in the web, calculating the tweets, the post on LinkedIn, and so on, many source of information. And MySQL in this ranking is always at the second place in every calculation. And it's also the winner of the database of the year of 2019. This because the MySQL 8 introduced so many features, so many new options that make it very popular, very interesting. After 25 years of life of the product and 10 years of Oracle stewardship, we are very proud, really proud about this product. This is popular, that is well known, but one of the reason of the well-known software is because MySQL is available on almost every platform x86 based. So it doesn't matter if you are using Red Hat, SUSE, Windows, or which language are you using to develop your application, PHP, .NET, Python, Java. Uh, MySQL has the connectors and have the software to install. It's not strange if you think that the LAMP architectures, Linux, Apache, and PHP, Perl, Python, are born with the M that stands for MySQL. The M of LAMP is MySQL. And in terms of availability, I would like to highlight with you that we have two flavors of MySQL. One is the MySQL that everyone knows. I call it in the slide InnoDB. In reality, we have other storage engines, other kind of tables that you can use, but just to identify it. The MySQL that is commonly used in most of the open source project. When an open source project starts and need a database, think to OpenStack project. Think when the Docker containers started, one of the first databases was MySQL inside the container. It's RDBMS, so it's relational, and also non-relational with document store capabilities. We tell more later about this. And it's based on table space. It's like our standard databases. There is a second flavor of MySQL that is called MySQL Cluster Carrier Grade Edition. You can configure MySQL Enterprise InnoDB in high availability, and this is different from the Cluster Carrier Grade Edition that is an in-memory database. Relational, full ACID, transactional, with a NoSQL interface, key values, and automatic sharding, high availability, a lot of very interesting features for real-time use cases, fully scalable, adding online nodes and 6.9 of SLA. I wrote in the slide 5.9, but recently in our investigation at the customer real life, we discovered that in reality we have a 6.9 on high availability, and is also available in open source and commercial edition. But it requires a different architecture, and it requires different commands. So in this presentation, I focus more on the usual MySQL server that each one of you have listened about if you are connected to this presentation. So MySQL offer you the right features that you need because MySQL is easy of use. One of the keywords for MySQL is easiness. In just a matter of minutes, just in few minutes you can install it and is up and running. Of course, not optimized, but up and running. And there are a lot of features that help you in deploy, like the new clone plugin, the new MySQL shell tool that is DevOps tools, and so on. But also there are graphical interfaces like Workbench. And it's also very nice for developers because it's offered now multiple interfaces, SQL and NoSQL with CRUD operation, a tool for prototyping document store that is called MySQL Shell, but also a lot of modern SQL options like common table expression with those functions, can check constraints, is available in containers. And with this, you can have a lot of good performances thanks to partitionings and many other improvements like histogram and so on. There are some benchmarks that we published that say that with MySQL 8 you can reach 1.8 million query per second on a single server. That's quite a lot. Of course, a big server, but let you scale up very well. And this is not enough because ease of use, developer-friendly performances, but you need in 2020 also security. So the option to use in efficient way the store procedure and encryption, but also advanced users management with roles, with multiple users and so on, and reliability, because if you put it in production you need to be sure that your data are safe. So transactional ACID with backups, high availability and so on. But because MySQL is open source, you can download and install it freely without pay a single cent to the Oracle that developed MySQL. You can use it for your production, for your business. But if you are using for your business, it's probably very important to know that you have also a version that is fully compatible with the open source and is supported, offering you tools and features that expand what you already have in the community. I don't say more words, and I would like to focus more on the MySQL plus NoSQL. So what is the big news with MySQL 8? It's the fact that you can have a different interface and you can choose between the SQL with modern options like common table expression, Windows function, and so on, and also use it in a different perspective as a NoSQL store with crude operation interface, keeping it full ACID and transactional. And be aware that MySQL is really used in production. We have big customers. If we speak about Facebook, Twitter, Booking.com, Airbnb, PayPal, and many other customers. Also in Italy, we have a lot of customers from the smaller to the biggest. And a lot of software is available as open source. But what does it mean in reality that we have an SQL plus NoSQL? This means that when you install the MySQL 8.0, by default, you have a couple of ports that are listening. The first is the standard 3306 port that you can use for the standard protocol connection. You submit your create database, your SQL commands, select, update, and everything. But there is also a second port, 3306, that you can use with a new protocol that is supported by all the modern connectors, .NET, PHP, Java, Python, that let you connect and work with the database as a document store. So forget about SQL. Collection add, find, modify, insert a document, retrieve a document. But because you have below MySQL, a real MySQL, it's for free. It's available for free, the acidity and the transactionality. So you have a NoSQL database with full transactional support. But let me say, because we have a MySQL, it's also possible to work in the same connection, same session with both the CRUD operation and, when it's needed, the query SQL. Because one of the limits of the NoSQL document store databases is the query. Very powerful in terms of insert, add, but the queries are a weak point for these databases. And you can select from the standard relational tables that are inside your database and also join the new document with the legacy relational tables. This offers you the opportunity to use the database in the best way. You need to create a very fast prototype. You can do it in documents approach. You need relational sections for your application. You can create data tables. You can move from tables to collections very easily, very freely. This is very big news, but it's not the only news that we have inside MySQL. There is also a native high availability, because when we speak about high availability, historically we are speaking about master slave, or better, today we are speaking about source and replica database. We are speaking about a active passive solution, but we have also the InnoDB cluster solution that offer a native high availability that is configured with MySQL tool that automate the cluster creation and the management, the interrogation, and so on, with all the core features running inside your nodes, because every installation that you have inside your environment that is based on version 5.7.17 and later, so every 8.0 installation already has the plugin that just need to be used. So you don't have to install, just create it. And it offers a virtual synchronous replication that grant you the high availability features and conflict resolution. In terms of application access, we offer also the MySQL router that is a proxy. So the application connect to router, and router connect to the right available server inside the cluster, because it knows the topology of the cluster. And let me say that the document store, InnoDB cluster are all open source features. You don't have to pay, you don't have to be bored about licenses. Just download the standard community MySQL and use the document store, create your high availability solution. It's the only full open source solution available for MySQL. But this is not enough, because we have a document store approach, we have availability, but we have also a lot of SQL improvement. For example, we have now system users and standard users. You can create roles. You have multiple passwords. This for security, but also for in terms of performances. You have a big set of online DDL operation with installed alter table. You need to add a column. This is a change that is made in a matter of few fraction of seconds, because it changes just the metadata. You have option to clone the servers and forget about backup and restore to create replications or high availabilities cluster and so on, and much more. But also for developers, because you have a lot of options. I introduced some of these, but let me say that we have now a very full set of data types and functions for the GIS support. We have functional indexes and a lot of other tools that are more than welcomed by the developers when I speak with them. So MySQL 8 is a very interesting features, is a very interesting release with a lot of features. But how can we use the MySQL inside the microservices? Because the second part of the title is not MySQL, but is microservices. Well, let me introduce something about the background. When we speak about microservices, we are speaking about the modern approach to develop the application, and was that started with the monolithic approach, everything in a single big program tied to a physical server. This is difficult to manage, to maintain, and so on. So for this reason, the developers, the technology moved to a modular approach with entire that offer the MZ application server, web server, database service, and a lot of virtual servers that many times are hosted inside private or public companies. Then this is nice, but not enough. So there was a new approach to split more the application and use microservices. So split the application not in module but in function, in services, and these services are well running inside containers. And last but not least, inside cloud environments. I'm speaking about cloud and I don't focus on public because you can use it in private or hybrid or public cloud, doesn't matter. So in terms of approach, the monolithic require a waterfall approach that develop the application as a single entity that connect to the database as a single entity. When we move to the modular approach, we are speaking about a more agile way to approach the development where you have front ends, back ends, and databases that are used by one application or the other or a single one. This overcome many limits of a monolith because you have to focus on modules to maintain, to upgrade, and so on, and also let you manage the high availability of the database, creating multiple clusters. But you have always models that you have to follow to maintain. So the next step is forget about the application and focus on the function of the service that are needed by the application. So you split the application in multiple services that not necessarily are small, are micro, and you put them inside containers that are very light, very fast to start, to be rebuilt, and so on. And every service, by definition, is completely independent and separated by the other. And the communication is based on APIs. Well, this is nice, but of course, we have to be careful when we speak about microservices and databases because microservices by default have a transitory workloads. They are stateless. You can start and stop, create tens, hundreds of them. You don't care. You can destroy them. But databases are completely different because databases are persistent. When you write something, you want to be sure that the data are there. and you don't lose even a single bit of information. And so you have to be careful about consistency of the data, integrity, protection. There is a big question about security because the data are your important value, but also for the people. So think about GDPR, PCI DSS, IPA, and so on and so on. And also in terms of resources that are required. So the question is, I have to work with the database as an application or as a part of the infrastructure at the same level like compute, like networking, storage, and so on. There are pros and cons in both approach. You can have a database in the infrastructure and deploy it inside a physical or virtual machine. Thus, let you dedicate resources, but of course, you reduce the flexibility and the independence of the services because you have few databases and microservices have to share the information, the repository. There is the risk of return to modular or monolithic approach. Instead, put the database inside a container and manage it inside your containerized environment. Let you assign a database to every service. Every service has its own set of data and make it independent from the other is highly portable because you can move a container with the database from your private cloud or where you want, reducing your lock-in. But of course, you have a lot of database to manage, to maintain. Well, how MySQL fit in this environment? Well, very well, because MySQL started 25 years ago, so there is plenty of documentation about how to install, configure, and use it inside the infrastructure. We have plenty of supported operating system with high availability native, with support in cloud environment. Also, Oracle have offered now a MySQL database service. And it's available also inside a container because it's very light and is available in both forms. So you can start in open source approach for free, and when your application becomes critical, you can move easily without change the application to the enterprise supported edition with all the tools that are required, and is fully supported. So the next MySQL can be inside the infrastructure, can be in the application layer, but there is another very important question for databases in microservices. And how many databases do you need? Because microservices independence between databases means that this microservice may need an interface for SQL transactional data or an interface for key values, for document based on JSON, for schemaless, and so on. So we have two approaches by the database now. One is the polyglot database dedicated to a single model, optimized for this model, and you deploy many of these. This means that the cons is that you have many databases to learn, many products to manage, many vendors for support, and so on. The second approach is the multimodal. So a single database offers different interfaces to let your services to use the good one. This also let the microservices share partially, at least partially, the information of the data that they need. So better flexibility, less software to learn, to support, but of course not always optimized for every workload. let me say that 8 of the most popular databases in the DB engine ranking moved from single model to the multimodal. So the most popular databases have now this second approach. And how MySQL answer this question? MySQL offer you the option to use MySQL 8 that offer SQL and document store, even the same connection. I don't speak more about this because I spoken about this in the previous topics. But let me tell you that the MySQL cluster, the second flavor, offer also an in-memory full ACID database that is not only SQL but also key value for very fast access to the data. So you can choose the model without learn different software. You deploy the MySQL and use what you need when you need without change configuration and other things. So MySQL answered the first two questions very well, but microservices are not only about the software, are also about the data. So be aware that in terms of the data model and management of the data, you have to move it from an approach that consider all the information in the same structure, in the same database. Doesn't matter if you are using tables, documents, and so on. You put everything in the same place to a fragmented data model where you define the domains that separate the data between the services to grant to services independency. So you can change a single service without influence the other. And this means that the most important part of your development is define exactly how you split the data, how you split the service, and choose the correct data store because you need for some workloads an ephemeral storage for temporary data, or you have to manage high volume of data very fast for login session, for session management, or operational or transactional activities for your application or for your critical data like money, payment, and so on. So the approach to the data when you are in a microservices architecture is not easy. You have to plan and design. Don't think that it's just a matter of start a process and use it. For this reason, there are a lot of books and discussion how to use, how to design your database. But for sure, you need a database that offer you flexibility and is very fast to be deployed and easy to manage because you have plenty of databases. So you need easiness, management, lightness, and don't forget high availability to be sure that your data are safe. And this is very good for new development where you don't care about you have in previous application. You have freedom to design. But there are a lot of legacy applications now because microservices are quite new. So please define your strategy and answer the most important question: why you want to migrate to microservices. I'm not a big fan about a single approach can solve every problem. I'm not a big fan of the approach that a single product, a single feature solve everything. So be careful and think what I have to achieve. it's really better to move to microservices for every solution, or I have to be careful and use the traditional approach for something and the microservices for something else that is more flexible, that need a reduced time to market and so on. That's that's very important. And if you see that your legacy application is a good candidate to be migrated to microservices, evaluate the partners that help you, like the Strangler partner. I have seen in the download sessions one dedicated to the Strangler partner that is a split and conquer approach. Split your application, find where you can move a function or a section of application to the new microservices, and step by step move from legacy to the new. And in any case, you need to think about the culture inside your company, about the knowledge of your developers, but also your operators, your DBAs, because you need DevOps culture. You need to think about continuous integration, continuous development, because services change very fast and continuously, and you need to be careful about the technology that you choose. And for data, be careful, because you don't have to waste your time or risk your most valuable things, that are data, the core of your business. So it's very important to design, to plan, to evaluate why you need, where you need it. And MySQL may help you a lot in this, because it offers DevOps tools like Workbench and MySQL Shell that let you work with developers and operators with the same tools. Please remember that the DevOps approach is not a matter of tools, it's a matter of mentality, about the approach of do the things. It's not a matter of I adopted this tool, I'm in a DevOps working active job. And what is interesting for MySQL is that let developers to choose freely the interface and the approach without bore the operator and DBAs about the software that have to be delivered. The developer use MySQL, the DBAs manage MySQL. How is used? SQL, NoSQL, both, doesn't matter. Change during life cycle of the application, the approach, doesn't matter. You don't have to inform the DBAs, nothing. Light, easy, fast, with native availability. So it answers very well to the questions that are raised by the microservices adoption. Is widely adopted with a lot of information. Please remember that one of the keywords of microservices is no lock-in. Microservices speak a lot about open source. MySQL is open source with all the things that you can need. And when you develop a new application, remember that at some time, even if you are using the open source approach for free, at some time you need help, because your production becomes critical, becomes in terms of business is risky for downtimes, or you need assistance and so on. So for this reason, remember that the open source version is completely 100% compatible with the commercial offer. So you can easily start with open source, and when you need more scalability or security, like transparent data encryption, like integration with your LDAP or Active Directory for managed users, when you need data masking, firewalling for SQL injections, when you need advanced tools to backup, not just export, import, but full incremental, compressed, encrypted, when you have to monitor with an integrated tool that offer you advices about the best way to configure the your instances and so on, but also support, because the commercial edition also don't offer just the technical support when you have an emergency, but also offer consultative support. You don't know the best approach, open a request. You don't know how to implement the replication, ask for help, not just when it's stopped the service. Well, MySQL is ubiquitous. So you have a community enterprise, you have a lot of installations, you have plenty of documentation, and it's a very good fit for the legacy application, of course, but also for the microservices, where you have a Dockerized database available. It doesn't matter if you are using Docker Hub, if you are using an OpenShift container. It doesn't matter if you are creating your own container for your application, for your development, for your environment. It's easy, fast, light, and very and ready for the business. You can use it, test it, create even high availability for free, but ready for the business. With this, I end my presentation now, and I'm available for questions that you may have for me in the chat. Okay, I stop now the presentation, and I uh, have a look about the chat.